For years, the millionaire's 6-year-old twins lived in silence, until one day a new cleaning lady walked in and managed what no nanny before her could. Before we dive in, share in the comments where you're watching from. And when we finish, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy! I used to believe silence was a mark of discipline, a sign of order, the foundation on which I had built my company and my life. But ever since Clara died, silence has become something else entirely. It clings to the walls of this house like frost, seeps into every corridor, every room, every breath my children take. My sons, Ethan and Daniel, 7 years old, twins so alike and yet so different, speak rarely, as if words themselves might betray the grief they have locked inside. Their world is books closed too quickly, toys untouched, meals eaten in silence while I sit at the head of the long dining table and pretend that structure will keep us from falling apart. I run my household like I run a boardroom. Rules, schedules, strict routines. No television unless for education, no unnecessary chatter at the table, bedtime at precisely 8. The nannies I've hired have all adapted to my methods quickly, or left. None of them stayed long enough to matter. The children never protested. They only withdrew further into themselves, staring at their plates, hiding behind the walls I had built around them and around myself. I told myself I was protecting them, but sometimes, late at night, I fear I've been suffocating them instead. When Sofia first appeared at my door, I barely glanced at her resume. She was meant to be a cleaning lady, nothing more. A girl in her mid-20s, plain clothes, bright eyes that I noticed only in passing. I interviewed her briefly in the foyer. Her voice carried a cheer I had not heard in this house in years. I cut her short. You will handle the cleaning, nothing else. You are not to interfere with the children. They have their routines, their nanny, their studies. Your presence should be invisible to them. Understood? She smiled in a way that unsettled me, not mocking, not submissive, but with a kind of quiet confidence. Understood, sir. Though children tend to notice more than we think. I frowned, disliking the hint of challenge in her tone. Notice as much as they want, it changes nothing. You will stay out of their way. She nodded, yet there was something in her eyes I could not decipher. Perhaps pity, perhaps defiance. I dismissed it. My children didn't need another adult intruding on their fragile world. They needed order, predictability, silence. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. That evening, after she left her first day's work, I walked through the halls. Everything was in place. Floors polished, windows spotless, the faint scent of lavender in the air. The children sat in the living room, side by side, staring at the silent television, not really watching. I stood behind them, hands clasped, and felt the chill of my own house settle deeper into my bones. And yet, when I passed the guest corridor where Sofia had been working, I thought I heard something unusual, something I had almost forgotten the sound of. A faint hum. A tune, light and careless, drifting from her lips while she worked. Music, in my house. I stopped, listening, my heart tightening in a way I could not explain. I almost called her back, almost told her that such frivolity had no place here. But instead, I stood in the shadows, unable to move. Because for the first time in months, I realized that silence might not be the only way to survive grief. I turned away quickly, my jaw set, convincing myself it meant nothing. Still, as I ascended the stairs, I could not silence the thought that perhaps I had just hired someone who would not obey my rules. And the strange part was, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted her to. The next morning began as all mornings did in my house, quiet, mechanical, as if every sound was pre-approved and rehearsed. The twins sat at the dining table, identical in posture, their small shoulders stiff as they spooned cereal without a word. I sipped black coffee at the head of the table, pretending not to notice how their eyes never rose to meet mine. It had become our daily ritual, silence as a shield, silence as punishment, silence as survival. I had already left instructions with Sofia before she began her duties. Work in the West Wing today, I told her. The children are studying in the library. Do not disturb them. She nodded, her usual brightness dimmed only slightly by my curt tone. I believe that was the end of it. I was wrong. Hours later, I returned from a call with my legal team and passed the corridor leading to the library. The door was ajar. A sound floated out that did not belong here, soft singing, playful, almost careless. My steps halted. I recognized the voice immediately. Sofia. At first, I was furious. Had she truly ignored my orders on her second day? But then another sound cut through my anger, laughter. Small, hesitant at first, then louder, warmer. I froze, because I knew those voices. Ethan and Daniel. My sons were laughing. I leaned closer, careful not to be seen. Through the crack, I saw them huddled behind the shelves, peeking at Sofia as she dusted, her voice carrying a cheerful tune I didn't recognize. She twirled the feather duster like it was a baton, pretending it was a microphone, slipping in exaggerated bowing gestures that made her look absurd. The boys pressed their hands to their mouths, shaking with laughter they could no longer contain. When she purposely missed a high note and fell to the floor in mock defeat, they burst into laughter so loud that the sound pierced straight through me. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Anger at her defiance, yes, but also something else. A shock, raw and painful. My children had not laughed like that since before Clara died. It was as if some long-buried part of them had been unlocked, not by my strict rules, not by their expensive tutors, not by the nannies I had paraded through this house, but by a cleaning woman singing badly with a feather duster. I clenched my jaw, torn between storming inside and letting it play out. But before I could decide, Sofia noticed the boys watching. Instead of stopping, instead of scolding them for spying, she winked and deliberately made her voice even more ridiculous. The boys nearly collapsed in laughter, rolling on the carpet, their faces red, their small voices echoing with a joy I had almost forgotten existed. I retreated quietly, my heart hammering. In my office, I opened the surveillance system I had installed years ago, cameras hidden in nearly every room of the mansion. On the screen, I saw them, my sons, still giggling, running in circles as Sofia pretended to chase them with a broom. It was chaos. Disorder. Everything I had worked so hard to prevent. And yet I could not look away. Unbelievable, I muttered, though I wasn't sure if I was condemning her or myself. When Sofia passed me later in the hallway, carrying a basket of linens, I stopped her. I told you not to involve yourself with the children, I said coldly. She met my eyes without flinching. I wasn't involving myself. I was cleaning. They were the ones who came to me. And you encouraged it. Her lips curved slightly, but her tone was steady. Would you rather I ignored them when they smiled for the first time in months? Her words struck deeper than I wanted to admit. I felt the ground shift beneath me, but I hardened my expression. Your job is to maintain this house, not to entertain my children. Do not forget that. She nodded politely, but her eyes carried a quiet defiance. As she walked away, I realized with discomfort that my son's laughter was still ringing in my ears, and no amount of silence could drown it out. That night, I stood outside the twins' bedroom door. Through the wood, I heard them whispering to each other, voices soft but alive. Ethan's laugh slipped through again, faint but real. My chest tightened. I had not realized until that moment how much I had missed that sound. And for the first time since Clara's death, I wondered whether my carefully guarded silence was not protecting them at all, but killing them slowly. The thought terrified me. I have lived through hostile negotiations where billions were at stake, and never once did I allow my voice to tremble. But nothing prepared me for the sound that reached me that morning, the fragile, uncertain voice of my son. It began quietly. I was in the study reviewing quarterly reports, trying to bury myself in numbers that no longer seemed to matter, when I heard footsteps in the hall. Children's footsteps. Ethan's, I knew instantly. He lingered near the doorway as though debating whether to enter. I pretended not to notice. Seconds stretched, then I heard him speak. "Sofia." The word was barely more than a whisper, but it carried through the silence like a crack of thunder. My son, who for months had hidden behind lowered eyes and sealed lips, was speaking. Not to me, not to his brother, not even to Mrs. Collins, the professional nanny I had trusted with their routines. He was speaking to the cleaning woman. I pushed back my chair and moved quietly to the door. Through the small gap I saw him, Ethan, clutching his toy car, staring at Sofia as she dusted the staircase railing. His voice trembled, but he repeated it. "Sofia." She turned slowly, as though afraid a sudden movement would scare him away. "Yes, sweetheart," she answered softly, kneeling so her eyes met his. My breath caught. "Sweetheart." I would have corrected her instantly, but the boy didn't flinch. He stepped closer. "Can you sing the funny song again?" His voice broke halfway through, but it was enough. My son had asked. He had wanted. He had spoken. For a moment, I couldn't move. Rage rose in me, sharp and instinctive. She had broken the rules again, worse than before. But alongside it came something I couldn't disguise as anger, gratitude, fierce and terrifying. My boy's silence had shattered, and she had been the one to break it. Not me. Not the therapists I had hired. Her. She sang again, quietly, with that same playful tone. Ethan giggled, covering his mouth as though embarrassed by his own laughter. Then Daniel appeared from around the corner, wide-eyed, watching his brother's courage with disbelief. Sofia glanced at him, smiled, and without asking, changed the words of her song to include his name. He laughed too, short, startled, but real. I slammed the door harder than I meant to, and the sound made them jump. Moments later I was standing in front of them, my voice like steel. "What is going on here?" The twins froze, but Sofia rose calmly. "They were just talking to me." "Talking to you?" My voice cracked. "They haven't spoken in months, and suddenly they speak, to you." Ethan's small voice quivered. "Sorry, Dad. I looked at him, stunned. My son was apologizing for speaking. I felt as though the ground had vanished beneath me. "Don't," I whispered hoarsely, my anger dissolving. "Don't ever apologize for that." Sofia placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, then on Daniel's. "They're not doing anything wrong, Mr. Carter. They're being children. They've been waiting for someone to listen." Her words pierced me deeper than I wanted to admit. I turned on her sharply. "You were told to stay away from them. You defied me again." She did not back down. "And would you rather they go back to silence?" I stared at her, my chest burning, torn between fury and something dangerously close to admiration. The twins clung to her, their eyes pleading silently. For the first time since Clara's death, they looked alive. I dismissed her curtly, but as she walked away, I felt my own children's gaze shift to me, not fearful, not distant, but expectant, as though waiting to see whether I would crush what had just begun. That night, when I checked the surveillance footage again, I saw them whispering to her in the kitchen, their voices tentative but real. Each word was a betrayal of the order I had enforced, and yet each word was also a miracle. I shut off the monitor, pressing my hands to my face. My rules had kept us safe in silence, but perhaps they had also kept us prisoners. And if Sofia could break that silence in a matter of days, what else could she awaken? The question haunted me, and I knew it would not leave me until I found the answer. Order in my house was a fragile thing, and it shattered the moment Mrs. Collins decided to confront me. She had served as the twins' nanny for almost a year, a stern woman with impeccable posture and a permanent frown that mirrored my own. She believed in schedules, in discipline, in rules carved so deep into the walls that no laughter could echo between them. For months, I had trusted her. Perhaps too much. That morning she entered my office unannounced, her lips pressed tight, her eyes burning with judgment. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk about the cleaning lady." I looked up from my desk, irritation rising instantly. "Her name is Sofia." "What about her?" "She oversteps," Mrs. Collins declared. "She interferes with the children's education, their routines, their discipline. Yesterday, I found them in the kitchen, laughing while making a mess with flour. Flour, Mr. Carter, spread across the marble counters like a snowstorm. She encouraged it." My jaw tightened. "And what happened after?" Her frown deepened. "After?" "They giggled. They spoke. They acted like undisciplined children who had never heard the word no." The irony struck me like a blow. My sons had finally spoken, finally laughed, and here she was treating it as a crime. I stood, my voice sharp. "They spoke, Mrs. Collins. Do you realize what that means?" She did not flinch. "I realize they broke their routine. And if you allow this woman to continue, you will undo everything we've built since their mother's passing. The children need boundaries, not chaos." Before I could answer, the office door burst open. Ethan and Daniel stood there, pale but determined. They had overheard. Ethan spoke first, his small voice steady. "Don't be mad at Sofia. She's nice to us." Mrs. Collins spun, scandalized. "You should be in your lessons." Daniel shook his head, his hands clenched into fists. "We want her to stay." The words cut through me. My sons, who had lived in silence for so long, were standing up for someone, for the first time, against authority. Against me. I tried to steady my voice. "Boys, this isn't your decision." But Ethan's eyes met mine, pleading. "Dad, please. She makes us feel happy." The room fell silent. Happy. A word that had not belonged in this house for far too long. Mrs. Collins's face turned to stone. "Mr. Carter, if you allow this, you will regret it. I cannot work in a house where rules are mocked and strangers disrupt the order." For years, I would have dismissed emotion in favor of control. But as I looked at my sons, alive, their eyes bright with something I hadn't seen since Clara's last day, I felt the balance shift inside me. "You're right, Mrs. Collins," I said slowly. "This house needs rules. But perhaps it also needs something else." Her lips parted in shock. "You cannot mean." "I do," I cut in firmly. "The boys have chosen. Sofia stays." The twins exhaled in relief, their shoulders loosening, while Mrs. Collins stiffened as though I had struck her. "Very well," she said coldly. "Then you may find yourself another nanny. I will not compete with chaos." She left without another word, her heels echoing down the marble corridor. The door closed behind her, and for a moment, all I heard was the twins breathing heavily, staring at me as though afraid I would change my mind. I knelt, drawing them closer. "You should never fear speaking to me. Do you understand?" "Never." They nodded, and for the first time, I felt the faint warmth of their small arms circling me, hesitant but real. It was a fragile embrace, but in it I sensed the beginning of something I had thought forever lost. Yet even as I held them, another truth weighed on me: the more Sofia awakened in this house, the more she awakened in me as well. And that was something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Grief has a way of hiding in objects. You lock it away in a drawer, behind a door, under a cover, convincing yourself that if you do not see it, it no longer exists. But grief waits. It lurks in silence, in the dust, in forgotten corners of the house. And sometimes, all it takes is one careless hand to bring it roaring back. It was late afternoon when I heard the sound, soft at first, a gentle press of keys that did not belong in this house anymore. I was in the study, halfway through a report I wasn't reading, when the melody drifted in. Faint, broken, hesitant. A piano. I froze. For a moment I thought my memory was betraying me, that my mind was replaying echoes of Clara's hands moving gracefully over the keys. But then I realized, it was real. Someone was playing. I stormed down the corridor, my pulse sharp. The living room door was open, and there she was. Sofia, seated at the piano I had ordered covered the day Clara died. The dust sheet lay folded on the floor, and her fingers traced a tune I recognized instantly, the lullaby Clara used to play for the twins at night. Rage consumed me. Stop. My voice cut the air like glass. Sofia's hands froze above the keys, her eyes wide. Mr. Carter, I didn't. How dare you, I thundered, crossing the room. This instrument does not belong to you. You had no right. She rose quickly, but her voice did not waver. It was covered in dust. I thought it deserved to be heard again. The children were listening from the hall. They smiled. Her words struck like a knife. I turned sharply, and there they were, Ethan and Daniel, standing by the doorframe, their faces alight with something between awe and fear. Daniel whispered, "Dad," it sounded like Mom. The weight of his words crushed me. My chest tightened, the fury inside me twisting into pain too raw to contain. "Out," I snapped, pointing toward the hall. "Both of you. And you," I turned on Sofia, my voice breaking, "if you ever touch that piano again, you will leave this house. Do you understand?" She did not argue, though her eyes glistened. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." I clenched my fists, turning away before she could see the storm rising in me. When the door finally closed behind her, I collapsed onto the piano bench, my hands trembling above the keys I had sworn never to touch again. Memories crashed over me, Clara's laughter, her fingers dancing lightly, the way she used to hum while the boys drifted to sleep. I pressed a single note, and the sound tore through me like grief made tangible. The twins lingered in the doorway, whispering. I caught fragments. "It was beautiful, why is he angry, why can't we hear it again?" Their words cut deeper than silence ever had. That night, I walked the halls long after the children had gone to bed. Every corner of the house felt different now, the silence less certain, less protective. Sofia had unlocked something I had buried with my wife, and I didn't know whether to thank her or curse her for it. For the first time in years, I stood before Clara's portrait in the gallery, the one I had avoided. I whispered into the darkness, "I don't know how to protect them without you." My voice cracked, raw and unsteady. And somewhere in the silence, I thought I heard her answer, not in words, but in the faint memory of that melody, lingering still. I closed my eyes, my hands pressed hard against the marble railing. Sofia had crossed a line, but she had also forced me to face the one thing I had feared most, the truth that grief could not be silenced forever. And deep down, though I fought it, I knew she was not finished changing this house. The house had always obeyed the rhythm I set for it, silent meals, polished surfaces, servants moving like shadows. It was efficient, controlled, predictable. And yet, in the days after the piano incident, I began to notice small changes I had not approved. The children's voices lingered longer in the halls. The scent of spices drifted faintly from the kitchen, not the sterile aroma of professional meals but something homelier, warmer. It unsettled me, though I pretended otherwise. One evening I returned from a late meeting, expecting to find the dining room set as usual, silver polished, plates aligned with military precision, the twins seated in silence, waiting. Instead, I found chaos. The long dining table was untouched. Instead, in the kitchen, flour dusted the counters, pots clattered on the stove, and my sons stood on stools beside Sofia, their small hands deep in bowls of dough. Ethan's face was streaked with flour, Daniel's hair dusted white, and both were laughing so loudly the sound shook the walls. I stopped at the threshold, my voice hard. "What is happening here?" Sofia turned, wooden spoon in hand, her cheeks flushed with exertion. "Dinner," she said simply. "Together." My glare darkened. This is not how things are done in this house. Meals are prepared by the staff, served properly, eaten in order. Daniel looked up, his eyes wide, and for the first time in months he interrupted me. But Dad, it's fun. We made the dough ourselves. Ethan chimed in, grinning. Sofia says food tastes better when everyone helps. I felt the weight of their words. I should have shut it down immediately, reminded them of discipline. But their eyes, bright, alive, made it impossible. Still, I forced steel into my tone. And what exactly do you call this mess? Sofia met my gaze without flinching. A family dinner. Not perfect. Not polished. But real. Her defiance burned me, yet beneath it something stirred I could not admit aloud. I sat stiffly at the counter while they finished cooking, certain it would be a disaster. The bread was uneven, the soup too salty, the roasted chicken clumsily carved. But when the boys proudly set the dishes on the table, something unexpected happened. They began to talk. Not just to her, but to me. Ethan asked if I liked the bread. Daniel told a story about how Sofia had let him crack an egg, badly, judging by the shell fragments I found. Their voices overlapped, clumsy and eager, their words tumbling into the silence that had once ruled us. I listened, awkward at first, then slowly loosening. And when Ethan asked about my childhood, how I had spent Sundays with my father before business consumed him, I found myself answering. I told them about climbing apple trees, about running through fields, about things I had not spoken of in years. Their eyes widened as though hearing of another man entirely. By the time the plates were cleared, laughter lingered in the air like music. I looked at Sofia, who sat quietly across the table, her smile soft but unreadable. She had broken every rule of my household, yet my sons were alive again in ways I had thought impossible. That night, after the children fell asleep, I stood in the quiet kitchen staring at the flour-dusted counter. For the first time since Clara's death, I realized the silence of this house had been nothing but fear disguised as order. And Sofia, reckless and stubborn, had torn through it with nothing more than a spoon, a smile, and the audacity to call us a family. I hated her for it. I needed her for it. And I knew I could no longer pretend this experiment would end easily. Because something had begun here, and neither discipline nor grief could stop it now. There are wounds you can hide from the world, but not from yourself. I had become an expert at concealing mine, behind work, behind routines, behind walls so high even my own children could not climb them. But grief has a way of resurfacing in unexpected places, and it was Sofia who unearthed what I had buried so carefully. It happened one rainy afternoon. I was in my office when I heard the unmistakable sound of the twins laughing from the living room, laughter mixed with something else, music, not from the piano this time but from the television. I walked in and froze. On the screen was Clara. Her face, her smile, her voice. A home video, years old. She was sitting on the very couch the boys now occupied, cradling them as infants, singing softly into the camera. The boys leaned forward, mesmerized, whispering, "Mom," their eyes sparkled with recognition, with joy, with pain. My chest tightened, fury igniting before I could stop it. "Turn that off." Sofia sat on the carpet with them, the remote in her hand. She looked up at me calmly, but her voice was gentle. "They should see her, Alexander. They should remember her with love, not silence." I said, "Turn it off." My voice thundered through the room, sharp enough to make the twins flinch. Ethan clutched Daniel's hand, his eyes filling with tears. Sofia rose slowly, standing between me and the screen. "Why are you angry at her memory?" "At them? This isn't hurting them, it's healing them." Her words struck like a blow. I wanted to shout, to remind her she was a guest in this house, a servant who had no right to pry open wounds she couldn't possibly understand. But the sight of my sons, tears on their cheeks, yet smiling as they watched their mother's face, made my anger collapse into something heavier. Fear. I turned away, my voice low, almost breaking. You don't know what it's like to wake every morning and feel the absence beside you. You don't know what it's like to see her in their eyes and know she'll never return. Sofia's tone softened, but her gaze held steady. No, I don't. But I do know this: silence is not remembrance. Silence is forgetting. And that's not what Clara would have wanted for them. Her words cut through me. I left the room without another word, locking myself in my office like a coward. Yet even there, her voice and my wife's laughter from the screen echoed in my mind. I poured a drink, my hands shaking, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry, not in front of anyone, but alone, where no one could see my weakness. That night, after the house had quieted, I stood at the doorway of the twins' room. They were asleep, clutching the framed photo of Clara that Sofia had placed on their nightstand. Their small faces looked peaceful, comforted. I envied them. I whispered into the darkness, "I'm trying, Clara. I just don't know how." As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Sofia in the corridor. She hadn't gone to bed. She stood silently, watching the boys through the half-open door, her expression soft but resolute. She glanced at me, and in that moment I understood something terrifying: she was no longer just a guest in this house. She had begun to stitch herself into the fabric of our lives, thread by thread, against every rule I had set. And though I resisted it with everything in me, I knew there would come a day when I could no longer pretend she was replaceable. That realization left me shaken, because I had promised myself never to love again. It was Sofia's idea to take the twins outside. She didn't ask for permission, she never did, but I discovered her absence with them one Saturday morning when the house fell eerily quiet. The nanny was gone, the kitchen staff busy, and my children's laughter drifted faintly from somewhere beyond the gates. Panic seized me, followed by fury. No one removed my sons from this estate without my knowledge. I drove to the park nearby, certain I would find them. And I did. On the grass, beneath a canopy of trees, Ethan and Daniel were running with other children. Their voices, once hushed within the mansion, now rang out like bells, shouting, laughing, calling to one another with a freedom I had not heard in years. Sofia sat on a bench, her face lit with amusement, cheering them on as though she had always belonged in their world. I strode across the grass, my voice sharp. "Sofia." She looked up, startled but not afraid. "Mr. Carter. We were just. You took them out without asking me?" My tone was iron, but the boys saw me and ran over, their cheeks flushed, their eyes sparkling. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, look. I played tag. I made a friend." I stopped mid-sentence. He had spoken without hesitation. His words flowed naturally, like water breaking free from a dam. Daniel added quickly, "We weren't scared, Dad. We had fun." I swallowed hard, my anger faltering. "Fun," I repeated, as though tasting the word for the first time. Sofia rose, meeting my gaze steadily. "They're children, Alexander. They deserve more than shadows and silence. They deserve sunlight, laughter, mistakes." Her defiance both infuriated and disarmed me. I wanted to remind her of her place, but the evidence was undeniable: my sons were alive here in ways they had never been within our marble walls. My voice softened against my will. If anything had happened. But nothing did, she interrupted. "You see. They can live without the house swallowing them whole." I looked back at the twins, who had already dashed off to rejoin their new friends. Their laughter echoed across the park, and I felt a sting in my chest. Gratitude, disguised as pain. As the sun dipped lower, we gathered them to leave. Daniel tripped on a root, stumbling toward the pavement. I lunged forward instinctively, but Sofia was closer. She caught him, steadying him against her chest. Her hair brushed across her face, and for a moment time stilled. I reached to help, my hand clasping hers as we held the boy together. Our eyes met, closer than they had ever been. I saw the defiance in her soften, replaced by something unspoken, dangerous. My breath caught. For the briefest instant, I wanted to close the space between us. But I pulled back sharply, releasing her hand. The boy scampered off, unhurt, oblivious to the storm inside me. The silence between us stretched taut as we walked back to the car. I kept my eyes ahead, but the memory of her warmth lingered in my palm. She, too, said nothing, but I caught her glance once in the rearview mirror, fleeting yet full of questions I could not allow myself to answer. That night, long after the twins had fallen asleep, I stood alone on the balcony. The city lights flickered below, 1,000 lives carrying on without knowledge of mine. I pressed my fists against the railing, furious with myself. I had promised I would never let another woman into this heart again. Yet one accidental touch had nearly undone me. I whispered into the night, "Clara, forgive me." But even as I said it, I knew forgiveness was not what I truly sought. What I feared most was that Sofia had already become impossible to forget. When Victoria arrived at the house, it was as though the past had returned in the shape society expected of me. She had always been there on the fringes, an old family friend, polished, elegant, the kind of woman my circle believed I should marry after Clara's death. She understood etiquette, reputation, the performance of wealth. She wore diamonds as though they were her skin, and her smile carried the certainty of a woman who had never been denied anything. She came unannounced one evening, her heels clicking against the marble as though claiming territory. "Alexander," she said warmly, her voice dripping with familiarity. "You've hidden yourself away too long. The city wonders where you've gone." I offered the customary greeting, keeping my expression neutral. "Victoria. I've been occupied with the children." Her eyes softened, a practiced look of sympathy. "And they need a mother, don't they? A woman of standing. Someone who belongs in this house." Before I could respond, the twins ran in, their laughter chasing each other through the hall. Sofia followed moments later, her hair tied back, her apron dusted from the kitchen. She froze when she saw Victoria. I caught the flicker in her eyes, hesitation, discomfort, something heavier. Victoria turned to her with the polite coldness of someone addressing staff. "And you are?" Sofia's voice was steady. "I'm Sofia." "The cleaning lady," Victoria concluded, as if labeling her erased her presence. She turned back to me with a smile meant only for high society. "Alexander, we have a gala next week. You must attend. It would be good for people to see you again. And," she added, her gaze flicking toward Sofia, "it would remind the children what kind of company they should be accustomed to." The sting in her words did not go unnoticed. The twins frowned, shifting closer to Sofia as though instinctively seeking her protection. I felt a sharp ache at the sight. Later that night, I found Sofia in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes with more force than necessary. I tried to speak. "You don't need to let her bother you." Her hands stilled, but she didn't look at me. "She fits here." "I don't. And the children will see it sooner or later." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "The children see more than you realize. And what they see is not jewels or gowns. It's you." She turned finally, her eyes glistening with something unspoken. "Don't, Alexander. Don't say words you can't mean. Because in the end, you and I live in different worlds, and one day you'll choose hers." Her words cut me deeply because I could not immediately deny them. She walked out before I could stop her, leaving only the sound of running water and my own silence. The next morning, the twins refused breakfast until Sofia sat with them. They clung to her arms, begging her not to leave, sensing what I feared, she had begun to pull away. That evening, I stood in the gallery before Clara's portrait, tormented. Victoria represented order, acceptance, everything society demanded of me. Sofia represented chaos, warmth, and the first traces of life I had seen in my son since Clara died. One path was safe. The other was real. And for the first time in years, I realized I could not choose safety. The storm came suddenly, as though the skies themselves had been waiting for the right moment to tear this house open. Rain hammered against the windows, wind howled through the chimneys, and thunder rolled across the city like a warning. The twins had already run to their room, clutching blankets, whispering nervously. I found Sofia in the corridor, closing the shutters, her hair damp from the draft. "You should go to them," she said softly, her voice almost lost beneath the storm. "I did," I replied. "But they asked for you." Her eyes flickered, uncertain, before she nodded and started toward the boys' room. I stopped her. "Sofia, wait." She turned, the candlelight catching her face, and I felt my resolve finally crack. For weeks I had fought this truth, burying it beneath rules, beneath grief, beneath the weight of what the world expected of me. But the storm had stripped away all disguises. "I can't lose you," I said, my voice unsteady. Her lips parted, shock flickering across her face. "Alexander, don't." "No," I cut in, stepping closer. "I've lived in silence for too long. I've watched my children fade, I've watched myself turn into a shadow. And then you came, with your songs, your laughter, your defiance. You disobeyed me at every turn, and I hated you for it. But at the same time, I've never been more grateful. You've given them back their voices. And you've given me back my own." Tears glistened in her eyes, though she shook her head. "Don't say this. You're a man of wealth, of status. I'm nothing more than a girl who scrubs your floors and dares to make noise where there was silence. One day you'll regret these words." I reached for her hand, gripping it firmly. "I regret only that I waited this long. I don't care about status. I don't care about appearances. I care about the sound of my sons laughing again. I care about the way this house feels alive when you're in it. And I care about you." Her breath trembled. "Alexander, if you knew how afraid I am. Afraid that this is only temporary, that once the storm passes you'll return to the safety of the life you lived before." "Then listen to me," I whispered. "This isn't the storm. The storm was losing Clara. The storm was watching silence consume us. You are the calm after it. And I am done being afraid of wanting more." For a moment, the house seemed to hold its breath. Then she stepped into me, her forehead resting against my chest, her voice breaking. "I love you too. I tried not to, but I do." The thunder roared outside, but inside the house, something finally quieted. I held her tightly, and in that embrace I felt the walls around us change, not colder, not heavier, but warmer, alive again. When we entered the twins' room together, their faces lit up instantly. They climbed into Sofia's arms as if they had been waiting for her all along. Daniel looked at me with wide eyes. "Dad, will she stay?" I knelt beside them, my hand resting on their shoulders. "Yes," I said firmly. "She will stay. We're a family now. Not because of rules, not because of order, but because we chose each other." Ethan smiled for the first time without hesitation. Sofia kissed their foreheads, her tears mingling with their laughter, and I realized this was the moment I had been searching for all along, not perfection, not silence, but something far greater. A second chance. And as the storm raged outside, I knew that for the first time since Clara's passing, this house was no longer cold. It was alive, filled with voices that would never be silenced again.